I'm Amber Wilson, 28, and my world shattered when my dad canceled my dream wedding, calling it a circus he refused to fund. For years with Ryan, my perfect proposal, all crumbling because my father decided our celebration wasn't worth the price tag. I was devastated, furious, and completely lost until the venue called him the next day. That unexpected call changed everything in ways I never could have imagined. Before I dive into how my wedding disaster turned into something beautiful, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family drama nearly ruin something important to you. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Ryan Matthews walked into my life exactly 4 years ago at my college friend Melissa's housewarming party. I wasn't even planning to go that night. I had a massive deadline for the graphic design agency where I worked, but Melissa practically dragged me out of my apartment. "You can't keep using work as an excuse to avoid living," she had said. Little did I know how right she was. Ryan stood out immediately in the crowded living room. Tall with kind brown eyes and a quiet confidence, he wasn't trying to be the loudest or most noticed person there. I overheard him discussing architecture. He was finishing his master's degree, and found myself drawn into the conversation. Where I was creative and sometimes impulsive, Ryan was methodical and thoughtful. We complemented each other perfectly. Our first date was at the Westbrook Botanical Garden. We spent hours wandering through the lush displays, talking about everything from our childhoods to our wildest dreams. I knew then that Ryan was different from anyone I'd dated before. He listened, truly listened, and remembered the smallest details. 3 months later, we were officially a couple. Fast forward 2 wonderful years. Ryan had established himself at a respected architectural firm, and I had been promoted to senior designer. We moved in together, merging his minimalist style with my colorful chaos. It worked somehow. The proposal came on our anniversary. Ryan suggested revisiting the botanical garden. As we approached the Japanese koi pond where we'd had our first kiss, I noticed something different. Tiny lights strung through the surrounding trees, softly illuminating the approaching dusk. Ryan took my hands, told me I'd changed his life, and asked if I would build our future together. The vintage emerald ring had belonged to his grandmother. Through happy tears, I said yes. The engagement bliss lasted exactly 2 weeks before reality set in. Planning a wedding is complicated, especially when strong personalities are involved. My parents, Thomas and Diane Wilson, had been married for 35 years. Dad was an electrical engineer who'd worked for the same company since college, climbing slowly but steadily to a management position. Mom had been a nurse before becoming a full-time mother to me and my younger brother, Jake. They were the definition of traditional, practical Midwesterners. I'd always been close with my father growing up. He taught me to ride a bike, helped with science projects, and cheered loudest at my art shows even though I knew he'd hoped I'd pursue something more practical. Our relationship became strained when I chose art school instead of the state university where he'd wanted me to study business. He eventually accepted my career choice when he saw I could support myself, but there remained an undercurrent of "I know better" in many of our interactions. The engagement party was the first sign of trouble. We held it at my parents' home, a modest 4-bedroom in the suburbs where I'd grown up. Ryan's parents, Barbara and David, came from Connecticut. They were warm but definitely more cosmopolitan than my family. Dad seemed uncomfortable with their stories about European vacations and their son's private school education. I noticed him growing quieter as the evening progressed. "They seem nice," he said afterward, in that tone that meant he wasn't impressed. "Pretty fancy folks." "They're not fancy, Dad. They're just different from us," I defended, already feeling the tension that would later explode. When Ryan and I started discussing wedding budgets the following week, I was surprised by my parents' reaction. We'd gathered around their kitchen table, the site of family discussions since my childhood. "We've always planned to help with your wedding," Mom said warmly. Dad nodded, though less enthusiastically. "We've put aside some money. 20,000 should give you a nice start." The figure surprised me. It was generous, but having browsed wedding websites, I knew it wouldn't go far for the celebration I'd begun envisioning. "That's really generous, Tom," Ryan said, using my father's first name as he'd been invited to do. My parents can contribute about the same. We've got some savings too. I squeezed Ryan's hand under the table, grateful for his diplomatic approach. But I could already see the furrow in Dad's brow that appeared whenever he thought money was being discussed too casually. "What kind of wedding are you thinking about?" Mom asked, excitement in her voice. Well, I pulled out my phone to show the Pinterest board I'd created. I've always dreamed of something romantic. Maybe a historic venue with character, good food, dancing under the stars. Dad's frown deepened as he looked at the images. "Looks expensive." "It's just inspiration, Dad," I said quickly, though in truth, I'd already researched several venues matching my vision. "Just remember," he said, pushing away from the table, "a marriage is about the life you build, not the party you throw." It was the first warning shot in what would become a lengthy battle. I should have paid more attention, but I was too caught up in the excitement of planning the perfect day. I didn't realize then that perfect meant very different things to my father and me. 3 weeks after our initial budget discussion, Ryan and I visited the Rosewood estate. The moment we drove through the wrought iron gates and up the tree-lined drive to the restored 1920s mansion, I knew this was it. The estate featured manicured gardens, a glass-enclosed reception space overlooking a small lake, and a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and hardwood floors. It was exactly the elegant, romantic setting I'd imagined. The venue coordinator, Samantha, showed us the bridal suite with its vintage mirrors and the groom's quarters with a private terrace. She walked us through various ceremony locations, the rose garden, the lakeside willow tree, or the grand staircase inside. Each option seemed more perfect than the last. "We only host one wedding per weekend," Samantha explained, "so you'll have exclusive access from Friday through Sunday morning." Ryan squeezed my hand as we exchanged glances. I could tell he loved it too. Then came the numbers. The venue fee alone was $28,000. My heart sank, knowing it was well beyond our initial budget, but I couldn't let go of how perfect it felt. "It includes tables, chairs, basic linens, and setup," Samantha continued. "And we have preferred vendors who offer our clients special rates." On the drive home, Ryan and I had our first wedding-related disagreement. "It's beautiful, Amber, but it's literally our entire budget just for the venue," he said carefully. "I know it's a stretch," I admitted, "but this is once in a lifetime. And maybe our parents would be willing to contribute a bit more if they saw it. It's really special." Ryan sighed. "I want you to have your dream day. Let's talk to them and see." My parents' reaction was exactly what I feared. Mom was enchanted by the photos, but concerned about the cost. Dad was blunt. "That's ridiculous," he stated flatly. "No location is worth that much for a single day. Dad, if you saw it, you'd understand. It's not just any venue. It would make everything perfect." "Perfect is subjective," he countered. "Your mother and I got married in her parents' backyard. 35 years later, we're still happy. Times are different now," I argued. "And we're not asking you to cover all of it. Ryan and I will contribute more from our savings." A long discussion followed, with Mom mediating as usual. Finally, Dad reluctantly agreed to increase their contribution to $30,000, with conditions. "That's it," he said firmly. "Not a penny more. And I want to see a complete budget before any major deposits are made." I hugged him, thrilled with the victory, not recognizing it as the Pyrrhic kind. "Thank you, Dad. You won't regret it. It's going to be beautiful." The venue was secured with a deposit, and the planning accelerated. I selected a gourmet caterer known for farm-to-table cuisine at $175 per person. The photographer's package came in at $4,500. Then came the flowers, the band, the lighting design, the custom invitations from a boutique stationer. Each decision seemed reasonable in isolation until the numbers were added together. I justified every choice. The food will be memorable, music makes the atmosphere, the photos are our lasting memories. The first major argument erupted over my dress. I'd fallen in love with a hand-beaded gown by a French designer, priced at $6,800. "Absolutely not," Dad exploded when Mom accidentally mentioned the cost during Sunday dinner. "No dress that will be worn once should cost that much." "It's my wedding dress," I countered, tears forming. It's special. Special doesn't have to mean financially irresponsible, he shot back. Ryan attempted to mediate. Maybe there's a similar style at a different price point? I felt betrayed by his suggestion. You don't understand. This isn't just any dress. The tension escalated when Ryan's parents called to explain they couldn't contribute as much as originally promised. His father needed unexpected back surgery, and their insurance wouldn't cover all costs. Of course their health comes first, I assured Ryan, though privately I panicked about the budget gap. We could scale back some things, Ryan suggested cautiously. Like what? The venue deposit is non-refundable. The caterer requires final headcount soon. What exactly should we cut? My tone was sharper than intended. I don't know, Amber. Maybe the custom cocktail bar? Or the extra hour of photography? Each suggestion felt like he was dismantling my vision piece by piece. I stormed out of our apartment, driving aimlessly before ending up at my friend Jessica's place. He doesn't get it, I vented. And my dad is being impossible. Jessica, always the practical one, asked gently, is it possible they have a point? The average wedding costs. This isn't about averages, I interrupted. This is about the day I've dreamed about my whole life. What I didn't admit, even to myself, was how much the wedding had become about proving something to my father, to Ryan's family, maybe even to myself. Each upgrade and special feature felt like an achievement, a statement that I'd arrived at some imagined level of success. The engagement photoshoot became another battleground. I'd booked a well-known photographer who specialized in editorial-style engagement sessions. The package included hair and makeup, multiple locations, and a custom photo album. The cost, $3,200. This is getting ridiculous, Dad said when I mentioned needing to adjust the budget again. Engagement photos used to be one picture in the newspaper announcement. That's prehistoric thinking, Dad. These photos are part of our story. Your story should be about building a life together, not creating a magazine spread. His refusal to cover the photoshoot meant dipping further into our savings, which led to another tense conversation with Ryan. We're spending money we should be saving for our future, he pointed out. This is part of our future, I insisted. These are our memories. But as the planning continued and the expenses mounted, I couldn't ignore the growing knot of anxiety. The dream wedding was becoming a source of tension rather than joy, and I didn't know how to step off the escalator I'd enthusiastically boarded. 6 months before our wedding date, Ryan and I met with our wedding planner, Brittany, to review the comprehensive budget. We sat at a corner table in an upscale cafe, spreadsheets and sample books spread between us. So here's where we stand, Brittany said, sliding a detailed printout across the table. With all your selections and the guest count of 175, we're looking at a total of approximately $97,000. Ryan choked on his coffee. That can't be right. We were aiming for around $60,000. Brittany smiled sympathetically. The venue and catering alone are $54,000. Then we have your band at $8,500, flowers at $9,200, photography and videography at $7,300, the dress and alterations at $7,400, and various smaller items like invitations, transportation, rehearsal dinner, wedding planner fees. As she continued listing expenses, I felt a cold dread spreading through me. How had we gotten here? Each decision had seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they created a staggering sum. We can't possibly tell my father, I whispered to Ryan after Brittany stepped away to take a call. He'll explode. Ryan looked pale. Amber, we have to. He's expecting to pay a significant portion. And honestly, I'm concerned too. This is almost twice our original budget. But we've already placed deposits on most things. We can't back out now. Maybe we can scale back on some elements that aren't finalized yet? The custom welcome bags, the late-night food truck, the fireworks. I felt tears threatening. Those are exactly the touches that will make our wedding special and memorable. Ryan reached for my hand. Our wedding will be special because we're committing to each other, surrounded by people we love. The extras are just extras. I pulled my hand away. Easy for you to say. You haven't been dreaming about this day since you were little. That evening, I avoided calling my parents, knowing what had to be discussed. Instead, I scrolled through Instagram, liking photos of elaborate weddings and elegant details, feeling simultaneously justified and guilty. When I finally worked up the courage to visit my parents the following weekend, I brought Ryan for moral support. Mom served her famous lasagna, while Dad talked about the neighborhood association's battle with a homeowner installing an unauthorized swimming pool. So, Dad said as Mom cleared the dinner plates, "How's the wedding planning going? Staying on budget?" Ryan and I exchanged glances. Actually, I began hesitantly. There have been some adjustments to the overall costs. Dad's expression immediately hardened. What kind of adjustments? Well, some things ended up costing more than expected. The catering, for instance, they've had to raise prices due to food costs. And we added a few small elements. How much more are we talking about? Dad interrupted. I took a deep breath. The total is now around $97,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom froze halfway to the kitchen, dish in hand. Dad's face flushed deep red. $97,000? He finally sputtered. Have you completely lost your mind? Dad, please try to understand. Understand what? That you're willing to start your marriage with this kind of financial irresponsibility? That you expect us to fund this extravagance? Ryan attempted to mediate. Tom, we know it's more than originally discussed. Amber and I are prepared to cover the difference. With what money? Dad demanded. Your savings that should be going toward a house? Or were you planning to put it on credit cards? The truth was, we had already started using credit cards for some deposits. Ryan had even considered taking a loan against his 401k. This is exactly the problem with your generation, Dad continued, warming to his theme. Everything has to be Instagram perfect. No thought about tomorrow, just what looks good in pictures today. That's not fair, I protested, tears now flowing freely. This is the most important day of my life. No, it isn't, Dad countered. Every day of your marriage is equally important. And starting it with this kind of debt is setting yourselves up for failure. Mom finally intervened. Thomas, please lower your voice. Let's discuss this calmly. But calm was impossible now. Dad paced the living room, listing all the better uses for such money: a house down payment, retirement savings, even a small business investment. Each suggestion felt like another attack on my dream. The argument escalated when Dad asked pointed questions about Ryan's career prospects and financial contributions. Is he even paying half? Or are you carrying the burden because his parents backed out? Dad, I gasped. Ryan's parents had medical expenses. That's not his fault. Ryan sat silently, jaw clenched. I could see the hurt and anger in his eyes. And what about your honeymoon? Dad continued. Another $20,000 for a week in Bali? I hadn't yet told him about the honeymoon budget, which was indeed close to that figure. His accurate guess made me feel transparent and foolish. The evening ended with me storming out, Ryan following quietly behind. In the car, the silence between us was painful. He had no right to speak to you that way, I finally said. Ryan stared straight ahead. Some of what he said wasn't wrong, Amber. I turned to him, shocked. You're taking his side? It's not about sides. It's about being realistic. We are spending an enormous amount of money we don't really have. So you agree with him that our wedding is just a waste? I never said that. But maybe we've lost perspective on what really matters. For the first time, I felt truly alone. Caught between my father's disapproval and my fiancé's wavering support. The wedding that was supposed to bring everyone together was tearing us apart. Over the next few weeks, the distance between Ryan and me grew. We had surface-level conversations about work and household matters, but avoided discussing the wedding. When the topic couldn't be evaded, like when the florist called about final selections, our interactions were tense and clipped. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents deteriorated further. Mom called daily, leaving voicemails that alternated between sympathy and gentle encouragement to reconsider some choices. Dad remained stubbornly silent. The tension reached its peak during a dinner with Ryan's parents, who had flown in for a brief visit. Barbara, ever diplomatic, asked innocently about the wedding plans. Everything's fine, I said tersely. Ryan looked at me incredulously. That's not exactly accurate. What's going on? David asked, concern evident. Ryan explained the budget issues and my father's reaction. I sat seething, feeling betrayed by his frankness. Perhaps your father has a point, Barbara suggested gently. Our own wedding was quite simple and… I don't need another lecture, I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. I'm sorry. I'm just tired of everyone having an opinion about our day. The dinner ended awkwardly, with another wedge driven between Ryan and me. Later that night, he confronted me. You can't keep shutting down anyone who disagrees with your vision, he said. Including me. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm starting to wonder if this wedding is about us as a couple, or just about having your perfect day regardless of the cost, financial or otherwise. His words stung because they contained a truth I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The wedding had become my identity, my measure of success. Compromising felt like failure. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, determined to make one last appeal for understanding. What I didn't know was that this conversation would push us past the breaking point. 3 months before our wedding date, the final venue payment of $14,000 was due. After weeks of minimal communication with my parents, I knew I needed to address the elephant in the room. Ryan was working late, so I drove to my childhood home alone, rehearsing my approach. I would be calm, rational, and appeal to Dad's love for me rather than arguing about money. Mom answered the door, her relief at seeing me evident in her warm embrace. He's in his study, she whispered. He's been worried about you, even if he won't admit it. Dad looked up from his desk as I entered, his expression a complex mixture of stubborn pride and parental concern. Financial statements were spread across his desk, their retirement accounts, I realized with a pang of guilt. Hi, Dad, I started, settling into the leather chair across from him. I think we need to talk. He nodded, removing his reading glasses. I agree. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe he had reconsidered. Maybe he understood how important this was to me. Mom brought in coffee and her homemade chocolate chip cookies, a peace offering, and sat beside me on the small love seat. The final venue payment is due next week, I began, trying to keep my voice even. $14,000. Dad's joy tightened almost imperceptibly. And I'm hoping we can move past our disagreement. This wedding means everything to me, Dad. I know it's expensive, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. He was silent for a long moment, looking down at the financial statements before him. Amber, do you know what these are? I nodded. Your retirement accounts? Yes. Your mother and I have been saving for 30 years. Careful, consistent investments from every paycheck. We've lived below our means, so we wouldn't be a burden to you or Jake in our old age. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I know you've been responsible with money, Dad. I've always admired that. Then why, he asked quietly, would you expect us to compromise our financial security for a single day of extravagance? I'm not asking you to compromise your retirement, I protested. The amount we discussed has nearly doubled, he interrupted. And don't tell me you and Ryan can cover the difference. He told me about the credit card debt you're already accumulating. Betrayal flashed hot and sharp. Ryan talked to you behind my back? He called because he's worried, Amber. About the money, yes, but more about what this is doing to your relationship. To our family. Tears threatened, but I fought them back. So you've ganged up on me. Great. Mom reached for my hand. Nobody's ganging up on you, sweetheart. We're concerned about the pressure you're putting on yourself. And the financial strain. I didn't come here to be lectured about financial responsibility, I cut in. I came to discuss the venue payment that's due. Dad leaned forward, his expression hardening. The answer is no. We're not paying another penny toward this wedding. Dad, please. No, Amber. I've thought about this a great deal. We agreed to contribute $30,000, which was already more than we'd planned. We've paid $23,000 in deposits. The remaining $7,000 will go directly to you and Ryan after the wedding, to start your married life, not to fund this circus. The word circus hit like a physical blow. All my carefully rehearsed arguments evaporated in a surge of hurt and anger. How dare you call my wedding a circus? This is the most important day of my life. If the most important day of your life is about flower arrangements and photo booths instead of the commitment you're making, then you're not ready to get married, Dad shot back. Mom gasped. Thomas. But the dam had broken. Years of simmering tension, my choices versus his expectations, my dreams versus his practicality, erupted in a torrent of accusations. You've never supported my choices. Art school was impractical. My career is just drawing pictures. Now my wedding is a circus. When will anything I value be good enough for you? When you start making responsible decisions. This isn't about my approval. It's about watching you prioritize appearances over substance. That venue, that dress, they're not investments in your future. They're expenses that will be forgotten a year from now. They won't be forgotten. They'll be memories we cherish forever. Memories don't require bankrupting yourselves. Dad stood now, his voice rising. Your mother's wedding dress cost $200. Our reception was in her parents' backyard. 35 years later, the love remains. The flowers, the cake, the venue, none of that mattered in the end. That was then. Things are different now. Yes, they are. Now it's all about impressing strangers on social media instead of focusing on what marriage actually means. The argument spiraled further, each of us dredging up old hurts and disappointments. Mom tried repeatedly to mediate, but we were beyond reason. Finally, Dad delivered the killing blow. I'm calling the venue tomorrow to cancel our payment. This stops now. I stood, shaking with fury and despair. If you do that, you're not welcome at my wedding. Any of it. There won't be a wedding at that venue without our contribution, he responded coldly. Watch me, I hissed, grabbing my purse and keys. I don't need your money or your approval. Mom followed me to the door, pleading. Amber, please don't leave like this. We can talk more tomorrow when everyone's calmer. But I was beyond listening. I drove away with tears blurring my vision, my phone already ringing, Dad calling to continue the argument or apologize. I didn't know which. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Ryan, my voice breaking as I recounted the confrontation. My dad is canceling the venue payment. He called our wedding a circus, Ryan. A circus. Ryan's response wasn't what I expected. Maybe we should take a step back and reconsider, Amber. If it's causing this much pain. Not you too. I nearly shouted. This is our wedding. Don't you care about that at all? Of course I care, his voice sharpened with rare anger. I care about marrying you. The wedding is just one day. Our marriage is what matters. The wedding is the beginning of our marriage. It sets the tone for everything. No, our commitment and how we treat each other sets the tone. This fighting over centerpieces and venues, this isn't us, Amber. It's not what I want our relationship to be about. I hung up without responding, too hurt and angry for rational conversation. For the first time since our engagement, I wondered if Ryan and I wanted the same things after all. The next morning, my phone rang at 8:17 a.m. Samantha from the Rosewood estate. My stomach dropped as I answered. Amber? I'm calling about your outstanding venue balance. We've received notice from your father that he's canceling the payment arrangement. The floor seemed to fall away beneath me. He had actually done it. There must be some mistake, I stammered. Can I arrange an alternative payment? Of course, Samantha said sympathetically. But we'll need the full balance within 10 days to secure your date. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to release the reservation. 10 days to come up with $14,000. It might as well have been $1 million. Ryan and I had already stretched our credit to the breaking point with other wedding expenses. Without my parents' contribution, the Rosewood was impossible. My dream wedding was collapsing around me, and with it, the relationships I valued most. The 2 weeks following my father's cancellation of the venue payment were the darkest I'd experienced since my grandmother's death when I was 16. I moved through my days in a fog of hurt, anger, and confusion. The vibrant excitement I'd felt about wedding planning was replaced by dread and anxiety. Ryan and I existed in an uncomfortable limbo. We still shared our apartment, but emotional distance stretched between us like an invisible barrier. Our conversations were limited to practical matters: who would walk the dog, what we needed from the grocery store, which bills were due. We slept facing away from each other, the weight of unspoken words making the queen-sized bed seem vast. I hadn't spoken to my parents since storming out of their house. Mom called daily, leaving increasingly worried voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to return. Dad's single message was briefer: "When you're ready to talk reasonably, I'm here." His tone suggested I was the unreasonable one, which only strengthened my resolve to maintain the silence. The reality of our situation became impossible to ignore when Samantha from the Rosewood called again. "I'm sorry, Amber, but without payment, we've had to release your date. Another couple has already booked it." I thanked her mechanically and hung up, then sat on our living room floor and cried until my throat was raw. Our wedding date, June 18th, now belonged to strangers who would dance under the crystal chandeliers and take photos in the rose garden. My perfect day had been given away. That evening, Ryan found me still sitting there, surrounded by wedding magazines I'd been tearing to pieces. "Samantha called you," he asked quietly, joining me on the floor. I nodded, unable to speak through fresh tears. He sighed heavily. "Maybe this is a sign, Amber. Maybe we need to completely rethink our approach." "What approach?" I asked bitterly. "There is no approach anymore. There's no venue, no wedding date, nothing." "That's not true," Ryan said, tentatively reaching for my hand. "We still have us. We still want to get married, right? That hasn't changed." The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Did I still want to marry Ryan? The past weeks had revealed a fundamental difference in how we viewed not just our wedding, but what mattered in life. The thought terrified me. "I don't know what I want anymore," I finally admitted. "Everything's such a mess." Ryan withdrew his hand, hurt flickering across his face. "I think we need some time to figure things out. I'm going to stay with Alex for a few days." As he packed a small bag, I felt like I was watching our relationship unravel in real time, powerless to stop it. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. Alone in our apartment, surrounded by the debris of my shredded wedding dreams, I reached for my phone and called the one person who would tell me the unvarnished truth. "It's about time," Jessica answered. "I was about to file a missing person report." "Everything's fallen apart, Jess," I said, my voice breaking. "The venue, my relationship with my parents, maybe even my engagement." "I'm coming over," she said without hesitation. "Don't move." 30 minutes later, Jessica arrived with wine, ice cream, and zero sympathy for my self-pity. "Okay," she said, pouring generous glasses of Cabernet, "talk to me about what's really going on." "Not the venue, not the money, the real issue." "What do you mean?" "The venue is the real issue. Dad canceled." "Stop," Jessica interrupted firmly. "The venue is a symptom, not the cause. This isn't about a building or a budget. This is about something deeper." I stared at her, defensive words rising to my lips, then deflating as the truth of her statement sank in. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," she insisted. "Amber, I've known you since freshman year of college. I've watched you put immense pressure on yourself to create the perfect appearance, perfect grades, perfect portfolio, perfect apartment. This wedding became another perfection project, didn't it?" Her words hit uncomfortably close to home. I took a large sip of wine before responding. "Is it so wrong to want one perfect day? After working so hard for everything else in my life?" Jessica softened. "No, it's not wrong to want something special. But you have to admit, this stopped being about special a long time ago. The average wedding costs around $30,000. You were headed for triple that. Where did you get that figure?" I asked, surprised. "Google," she shrugged. "Did you ever actually research average costs, or did you just look at luxury wedding features?" I hadn't. I'd browsed inspiration, not information. Each decision had been made in isolation, based on what I loved, not what was reasonable. "The wedding industry is designed to make you feel inadequate," Jessica continued. "Every magazine, blog, and Instagram account sells the idea that more is better, that your love is measured by how much you spend celebrating it." "It's not about the money," I protested weakly. "It's about creating memories." "Which costs do you think create the best memories?" My sister spent $70,000 on her wedding. 3 years later, she and Matt were in couples therapy because of the financial stress they started their marriage with. "That's different," I argued. "They had other issues." "Everyone has other issues, Amber. Money problems just amplify them." Jessica refilled our glasses. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded, bracing myself. What's your favorite memory with Ryan? The moment when you felt most connected to him. The answer came immediately. Last summer, we took that road trip to the lake. The cabin we rented had that massive thunderstorm the second night, remember? The power went out, and we sat on the screened porch with candles, drinking cheap wine and talking until dawn. And how much did that cost? I saw her point. Not much. The cabin was like $80 a night. So your most meaningful memory with the man you love cost less than your cake topper, Jessica observed. Doesn't that tell you something? The defensiveness that had sustained me for weeks began to crumble. I thought about my parents' modest home, filled with 35 years of memories. I thought about my father, who had worked overtime throughout my childhood to provide stability rather than luxury. I think I've been an entitled brat, I finally admitted, tears welling again. Jessica laughed softly. Maybe a little. But mostly you got caught up in the wedding industrial complex like thousands of other women. Over the next few days, I began researching wedding costs in earnest. The figures shocked me. The average American wedding indeed hovered around $30,000. The median was even lower, around $15,000, meaning half of all couples spent less than that. I looked at our credit card statements, adding up what we'd already spent on deposits and non-refundable fees. The total made me physically ill. No wonder Ryan had been concerned. No wonder Dad had been horrified. As I scrolled through my wedding planning photos, I tried to view them through my father's eyes. The gold-rimmed chargers at each place setting. The custom monogrammed cocktail napkins. The hand-calligraphed escort cards. None of these things would strengthen our marriage or build our future. They were ephemeral luxuries that had somehow become necessities in my mind. A week after Ryan left, I found myself driving to my parents' house, stomach knotted with anxiety and remorse. Mom opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into her shoulder. "Oh, honey," she said, voice thick with emotion. "We've been so worried." Dad appeared in the hallway behind her, his expression cautious, but hopeful. I'd prepared a speech, but at the sight of him, looking older and more tired than I remembered, all my carefully chosen words evaporated. "I've been so stupid," I blurted instead. His face softened immediately. He opened his arms, and I walked into his embrace, feeling like a little girl again. "Not stupid," he corrected gently. "Just caught up in something bigger than yourself." We moved to the living room, where Mom brought coffee and Dad's favorite oatmeal cookies. For the first time in months, we talked openly, not just about the wedding, but about expectations, values, and the future. "I never meant to hurt you," Dad said. "I just couldn't bear watching you start your marriage with financial stress I know all too well." "What do you mean?" I asked. He exchanged glances with Mom before continuing. "Your mother and I nearly divorced during our second year of marriage. The stress of debt, student loans, credit cards, a car payment we couldn't really afford, it poisoned everything. Simple disagreements became major fights because we were always anxious about money. This was news to me. My parents' marriage had always seemed rock solid." "How did you get through it?" I asked quietly. "We got honest about our finances," Mom explained. "We made a plan and stuck to it, even when it meant saying no to things we wanted. It wasn't easy, but it saved our marriage and eventually gave us the security to provide for you and Jake." Their story shifted something fundamental in my perspective. The wedding I'd been planning wasn't just financially irresponsible. It was at odds with the very values that had provided me with a stable, loving childhood. As I drove home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The reconciliation with my parents had begun the healing process, but one crucial relationship remained in limbo. Ryan answered my call on the first ring. "Are you okay?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I think I might be getting there. Can we talk?" "In person." An hour later, we sat across from each other at our small kitchen table, the distance between us both physical and emotional. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began hesitantly. "About the wedding. About us. About what really matters." Ryan nodded, waiting for me to continue. I got lost in the planning and trying to create something perfect. I forgot what we were actually celebrating. I reached for his hand, relief flooding through me when he didn't pull away. I'm sorry, Ryan, for prioritizing a party over our partnership. For putting so much pressure on one day that I was willing to sacrifice our future financial stability. I should have been more direct earlier, Ryan admitted. I saw the costs mounting, but I wanted you to be happy. I thought I was supporting you by going along with everything. That wasn't support, I said gently. We both needed to be honest about our concerns. So where do we go from here? Ryan asked. Do you still want to get married? More than ever, I answered without hesitation. But not the wedding I was planning. Something that actually reflects who we are and what we value. The smile that spread across Ryan's face was worth more than any venue or designer dress. I think that's the first time in months we've talked about what we value instead of what looks good in photos. As we began to rebuild our connection that night, something unexpected happened. My phone rang at 9:43 p.m., an unfamiliar number with our area code. Is this Amber Wilson? A man's voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is she. Amber, my name is Michael Donovan. I'm the owner of the Rosewood Estate. I believe we need to talk about your wedding. I was confused. Samantha had already confirmed our date was gone. I'm sorry, but we've had to cancel. The venue released our date. That's actually why I'm calling, Michael said. I received a very interesting call from your father today. My heart skipped a beat. What had Dad done now? Your father and I have history, Michael continued. He didn't realize it until after your venue situation developed, but he and I served together in the Army Corps of Engineers 30 years ago. Tom Wilson was one of the finest men I ever worked with. The pieces suddenly connected. Dad had occasionally mentioned his military service, including a close buddy named Donovan, who'd gone into real estate development after discharge. I'd never made the connection to the Rosewood Estate's ownership. When he realized who owned the property, he called to explain the situation, Michael continued. We had a long talk about family, values, and what really matters in life. I held my breath, afraid to hope. I'd like to offer you and Ryan a modified package at the Rosewood. Nothing as elaborate as originally planned, but something meaningful and beautiful that won't start your marriage with financial strain. As Michael outlined his proposal, a significant discount that would bring the venue cost in line with our revised budget, tears of gratitude filled my eyes. This unexpected connection, this act of kindness from a link to my father's past, felt like the universe offering a second chance. Thank you, I managed when he finished. This is incredibly generous. Don't thank me, Michael replied. Thank your father. His integrity made quite an impression on me all those years ago. Some things are worth more than money. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. The venue we'd lost was potentially back within reach, not as the extravagant affair I'd originally planned, but as something more meaningful and financially responsible. Ryan squeezed my hand. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, I said slowly, that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you to what you actually need. He smiled. That sounds like a lesson worth learning, even the hard way. That night, I called my father to thank him. His surprised laugh when I told him about Michael's offer was one of the sweetest sounds I'd ever heard. I had no idea he'd do that, Dad insisted. I just wanted to clear the air after recognizing his name on the contract you left behind. Whether that was entirely true or my father had sought a compromise solution, I'll never know for certain. What matters is that in that moment, I understood what he'd been trying to tell me all along. The trappings and price tag weren't what made a wedding or a marriage special. It was the relationships, the values, and the love that created meaning. As I fell asleep that night, Ryan's arm around me for the first time in weeks, I felt a peace that no perfect centerpiece or designer gown could ever provide. The wedding would happen after all, but it would be a celebration of substance, not just style. The morning after Michael Donovan's surprising call, I woke with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. Ryan had already left for work, but he'd left a pot of coffee brewing and a note on the kitchen counter, excited to plan our real wedding together. Love you. Those simple words filled me with more joy than all the elaborate Pinterest boards and wedding magazines combined. We were back on the same page, focused on what mattered most, our commitment to each other. Before heading to work, I called my father. There was so much more I wanted to understand about his connection to Michael Donovan and what had transpired between them. "Morning, Amber," Dad answered, his tone cautiously warm. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," I admitted. "Dad, I need to know, what exactly did you say to Michael? Did you ask him to give us the venue back?" Dad chuckled. "I didn't ask for anything. After we argued, I was reviewing the contract you'd left behind, and I noticed Michael's name as the property owner. It took me a minute to connect the dots. Mike Donovan from my Army days had mentioned buying a historic property years ago, but I never made the connection to your venue." "So you called him just to reconnect?" "Honestly, I called to apologize for canceling the payment so abruptly. Whatever our disagreements, I didn't want to burn bridges with an old friend. When I explained who you were and what had happened, Mike remembered that I'd helped him through a rough patch after our deployment. Said he never forgot it." I heard the emotion in Dad's voice, the mixture of pride and humility that was so quintessentially him. "He told me he was offering us a modified package," I said. "Something more reasonable, but still at the Rosewood." "That sounds like Mike," Dad replied. "Always looking for the middle ground. He was the mediator in our unit. The one who could find compromise when the rest of us were ready to throw punches. Like father, like friend," I teased gently, remembering all the times Dad had mediated between Mom and me during my teenage years. He laughed. "Maybe so. The important thing is, this gives you and Ryan a chance to have a beautiful wedding without the financial burden. If that's still what you want." The question gave me pause. Was the Rosewood still what I wanted? After all the drama, the fights, the reassessment of priorities? "I need to talk to Ryan," I said finally. "And maybe see the new proposal from Michael first. But either way, I'm grateful for the option." "Take your time," Dad advised. "And remember, whatever you decide, your mother, and I just want you to be happy. Truly happy, not Instagram happy." His distinction made me smile. I'm starting to understand the difference. Later that day, Michael emailed his modified proposal. The Rosewood estate would host our wedding for exactly half the original quote. Still special, still beautiful, but with scaled-back services. We could have exclusive use of the property for Saturday only instead of the entire weekend. The ceremony would be in the Rose Garden, cocktail hour on the terrace, and reception in the smaller lakeside pavilion rather than the grand ballroom. It was a generous offer that would allow us to have the venue of my dreams without the financial nightmare. When I forwarded it to Ryan, his response was immediate. "This feels right. Let's talk tonight." That evening, we sat on our apartment balcony with takeout and wine, reviewing the proposal together. The reduced price still represented a significant investment, but combined with our revised expectations for other elements, it brought the overall wedding back within reach of our original budget. "What do you think?" Ryan asked, studying my expression carefully. I took a moment to really consider my answer. A week ago, I would have seen this as settling for less. Now, it feels like focusing on what matters. Relief washed over his face. "That's exactly how I feel. We can have a beautiful day that's about us, not about impressing others." But I hesitated. Are we making this decision because it's what we truly want, or because we feel pressured by everything that's happened? Ryan considered this. "Fair question. How about this? Let's sleep on it. If we both wake up tomorrow feeling excited rather than resigned, we'll know it's right." The next morning, Ryan found me already awake, sketching a revised floor plan for the lakeside pavilion at our kitchen table. "I guess that answers my question," he laughed, kissing the top of my head. We called Michael together and accepted his offer. The relief and excitement in his voice mirrored our own. "Tom Wilson's daughter deserves a beautiful wedding," he said warmly. "I'm honored to be part of making it happen." With the venue secured, we turned our attention to revising every other aspect of our plans. The guest list was trimmed from 175 to 100, focusing on the people who truly mattered in our lives. The elaborate 5-course dinner became a more intimate farm-to-table meal featuring seasonal ingredients at half the per-person cost. The designer gown I'd obsessed over was canceled. Losing the deposit hurt, but continuing down that path would have hurt more. Instead, I found a simple, elegant dress at a local boutique for 1/5 the price, and loved it even more for what it represented, choosing substance over show. Each revision to our plans felt like removing a weight, bringing us closer to a celebration that truly reflected our values rather than the wedding industry's expectations. The most meaningful moment in this process came when we met with my parents to discuss their contribution. We gathered around their kitchen table. The site of our earlier conflicts, this time with spreadsheets that reflected our new approach. We've recalculated everything, I explained, sliding the budget across the table. The total is now just under $40,000, including our honeymoon. Dad studied the numbers carefully, his expression unreadable. And your contribution? Ryan and I can cover $25,000 from our savings without touching our house fund or going into debt, I said proudly. We're hoping you might still be willing to contribute the $15,000 you haven't paid yet from your original offer. Dad looked up, his eyes suspiciously bright. You've really thought this through. We have, Ryan confirmed. No credit cards, no loans. Just a meaningful celebration within our means. Mom reached for Dad's hand. Tom. He cleared his throat. I'll do better than that. The original $30,000 still stands, with one condition. I tensed, waiting. The extra $15,000 goes directly into your house fund after the wedding. Consider it our investment in your future, not just your wedding day. Tears sprang to my eyes as I realized what he was offering, his full support, both emotional and financial, along with the wisdom I'd initially rejected. Deal, I said, voice breaking. Ryan shook Dad's hand firmly. Thank you, Tom. For everything. Mom broke the emotional tension by bringing out a bottle of champagne. I think this calls for a toast, she announced. To new beginnings and lessons learned. As we clinked glasses, I felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected turn our wedding journey had taken. What had begun as a crisis, my father canceling our venue payment and calling our plans a circus, had transformed into an opportunity to realign our priorities and strengthen our most important relationships. That night, Ryan and I created a new tradition. We wrote letters to each other describing not what we wanted in our wedding, but what we wanted in our marriage. We sealed them in envelopes to be opened on our first anniversary, a reminder of what truly mattered beyond the celebration. When Michael Donovan called a week later with news that he'd found the perfect florist, his niece who was building her portfolio and would create our arrangements at cost, it felt like another affirmation that we were on the right path. The universe seemed to be rewarding our shift in perspective with unexpected gifts. Your dad must have been quite something in the army, Michael remarked during our call. He never mentioned helping me through my divorce and financial mess back then, did he? No, I admitted, he's not one to talk about helping others. Michael's laugh was warm. That sounds like Tom. He loaned me money when I was at rock bottom, refused to take interest, said repayment was optional. Called it investing in people instead of things. That philosophy helped me build Rosewood, actually. His words stayed with me long after we hung up. Investing in people instead of things. Had my father been trying to teach me that lesson all along? As our revised wedding plans came together, simpler but somehow more meaningful with each choice we made, I realized that my father's seemingly harsh stance had actually been his way of investing in us, in our future happiness. The venue calling him the next day hadn't just saved our wedding location, it had created an opportunity for profound growth and understanding. The greatest gift wasn't the Rosewood estate at half price. It was the lesson that would strengthen our marriage for years to come. Our wedding day dawned clear and perfect, one of those rare June mornings when the temperature hovers in the low 70s with just enough breeze to make the rose petals dance along the garden pathways of the Rosewood estate. As I stood in the quaint bridal cottage that had replaced the grand bridal suite in our original plan, I felt none of the disappointment I might have expected months earlier. My mother zipped up my dress, the boutique find that fit as if it had been made for me, at a fraction of the designer gown's cost. The simple silk silhouette with delicate lace detailing felt more genuinely me than the elaborate beaded creation I'd originally coveted. You look beautiful, Mom said, her eyes glistening. And peaceful. That was the word, peaceful. The months of revised planning had transformed our wedding from a source of stress and conflict to a genuine labor of love. Each adjusted decision had brought Ryan and me closer, reinforcing our partnership rather than testing it. The venue still took my breath away, but now I appreciated it for different reasons. The rose garden where we would exchange vows wasn't just picturesque, it was the place where Michael Donovan had proposed to his own wife 30 years earlier, a detail he'd shared during our revised planning. The lakeside pavilion wasn't just a budget-friendly alternative to the grand ballroom. Its open sides would allow our guests to feel connected to the natural beauty surrounding us. A light knock at the door preceded Jessica's entrance. As my maid of honor, she'd been an unwavering source of support and practical wisdom throughout our wedding evolution. "Your dad's here," she announced, her smile knowing. "And he brought something for you." Dad entered cautiously, his eyes widening at the sight of me in my wedding dress. "Amber," he breathed, momentarily speechless. I turned in a small circle. "What do you think?" "I think Ryan is the luckiest man alive," he said, voice rough with emotion. "And I have something for you." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "This was your grandmother's. Mom and I thought today would be the perfect time for you to have it." Inside lay a delicate pearl bracelet with a tiny diamond clasp. I remembered it from childhood visits to Grandma Wilson, how she'd let me try it on while telling stories of her own wedding day. "Something old," Dad said as he fastened it around my wrist. "And a reminder that the most precious things aren't always the most expensive." The tears I'd managed to hold back all morning threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. "Thank you," I whispered, hugging him tightly. "For everything. Including saying no when I needed to hear it." He chuckled, pulling back to look at me. "That was the hardest part of being your father. Saying no when yes would have been easier in the moment." "I understand that now," I said sincerely. Our ceremony was everything I could have hoped for. Intimate, personal, and focused entirely on the commitment Ryan and I were making to each other. Standing beneath an arch of garden roses, arranged by Michael's talented niece, we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising not just love and fidelity, but financial partnership and mutual respect for each other's dreams. The 100 guests who surrounded us weren't just witnesses, but active participants in our celebration. Instead of the formal reception I'd originally planned, with assigned seating and elaborate place settings, long farm tables encouraged conversation and connection. The simplified menu, featuring local, seasonal ingredients, received more compliments than the 5-course gourmet meal ever would have. Perhaps the most magical moment came during the father-daughter dance. As Dad led me around the pavilion's wooden floor, he leaned close to speak privately. "I need to confess something," he said quietly. "I didn't just happen to notice Michael's name on your contract." I looked up surprised. "What do you mean?" "After our fight, when I was so upset about the wedding costs, your mother reminded me that my old army buddy had gone into property development. She suggested I check if there was a connection. When I confirmed it was the same Michael Donovan, I called him immediately." "So you were trying to fix things all along?" I asked, amazed. Dad smiled sheepishly. "I was trying to find a compromise. I never expected him to offer such a generous solution, but I hoped he might have some advice. I couldn't bear the thought of your wedding dreams being completely shattered, even if I disagreed with the expense." The revelation that my father had been working behind the scenes to salvage what mattered most to me, while still holding firm on his financial principles, filled me with renewed appreciation for his wisdom and love. As the dance ended, Dad kissed my cheek. "I'm proud of you, Amber. Not for having a beautiful wedding, but for the growth you've shown in planning it. That's the foundation that will serve your marriage well." The evening continued with moments that would have been impossible in our original plan. Ryan's father, David, whose medical expenses had limited their financial contribution, surprised everyone by bringing his saxophone, an instrument he hadn't played publicly in years, to perform the song from Ryan's childhood that had always represented love and family to him. My brother Jake and his girlfriend created a handmade photo display featuring candid moments from our relationship, mounted on reclaimed wood from our grandfather's barn. These personal touches cost little but meant everything. When it came time for speeches, Ryan stood and surprised me with words I'll never forget. 6 months ago, he began, Amber and I were planning a very different wedding. One that looked perfect on paper, but was creating stress and division in the relationships that matter most to us. What seemed like a disaster at the time, having to completely reimagine our day, turned out to be the greatest gift. He raised his glass. To Thomas Wilson, who had the courage to say no when it would have been easier to say yes. To Michael Donovan, who showed us that generosity comes in many forms. And to my beautiful wife, who taught me that flexibility and growth are the true foundations of partnership. As the evening wound down, we gathered our guests for a tradition we created specifically for our revised celebration. Instead of an elaborate sparkler send-off, we distributed small paper lanterns. Each guest wrote a wish or piece of advice for our marriage before lighting their lantern and releasing it over the lake. The sight of those glowing wishes rising into the night sky, 100 expressions of love and hope from the people who mattered most, was infinitely more meaningful than the expensive fireworks display I'd originally planned. Later, as Ryan and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, a week at a charming cottage on Lake Michigan rather than the extravagant Bali trip, Michael Donovan approached with his wife, Sharon. "Your father is a remarkable man," he told me, shaking Ryan's hand. 30 years ago, he taught me that integrity and relationships matter more than money or status. It seems he taught you the same lesson. Eventually, I laughed. I just needed a reminder. Sharon smiled warmly. The best marriages are built on those reminders, those moments when we realign our priorities and remember what truly matters. As we drove away, tin cans rattling behind our car, a DIY touch that cost nothing but created endless laughter, I rested my head on Ryan's shoulder. "Happy?" he asked simply. "More than I ever thought possible," I answered truthfully. And it has nothing to do with the venue or the dress, or any of the things I thought were essential. Ryan squeezed my hand. "Who would have thought your dad canceling our venue payment would lead to all this?" "He knew," I said, the realization dawning fully. "He knew that sometimes you have to lose what you think you want to discover what you truly need." On our first anniversary, as promised, we opened the letters we'd written to each other during our wedding planning crisis. Ryan's words captured perfectly the journey we'd experienced. "I don't know what our wedding will look like by the time you read this letter," he'd written, "but I know that the lessons we're learning now about communication, priorities, and what really matters will strengthen every day of our marriage that follows." He was right. The financial habits we developed during our wedding planning served us well as we purchased our first home, with the down payment boosted by my father's extra contribution. The communication skills we honed through conflict helped us navigate career changes and family challenges. 3 years after our wedding, we welcomed our daughter, Lily. As I rocked her in the nursery we'd carefully budgeted for, I often reflected on how differently our family story might have unfolded without my father's difficult but necessary intervention. When Lily was baptized, we asked my father to speak during the ceremony. His words touched everyone present. "The greatest gifts we can give our children aren't things, but values. Sometimes those gifts come wrapped in challenging packages, like saying no when yes would be easier. But true love means investing in someone's long-term happiness, not just their momentary pleasure." Our wedding album sits on our coffee table, filled with images more meaningful than any magazine perfect spread could have been. The joy on our faces, the personal touches created with love rather than purchased for effect, the genuine connections between our guests, these are the treasures that remained long after the celebration ended. As for the Rosewood estate, we maintain a special relationship with the property. Each year on our anniversary, we visit the Rose Garden where we exchanged vows. Michael and Sharon Donovan join us for dinner afterward, the 4 of us sharing updates on our lives and reflecting on how unexpected connections can change everything. Last year, I overheard my father giving advice to my cousin who had just announced her engagement. "Remember that a wedding is just one day, but a marriage is a lifetime. Invest accordingly." I smiled, recognizing my own hard-won wisdom in his words. The circus my father refused to fund had transformed into a celebration of substance and meaning, and taught me lessons that would enrich every day of the marriage it began. What lesson have you learned about prioritizing what truly matters? Have you ever had a situation where what seemed like a disaster actually led to something better? Drop your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Life has a way of teaching us exactly what we need to learn, even when the lessons come packaged as disappointments. Thank you for sharing in my journey, and may your own path be filled with the wisdom that comes from embracing what matters most.